Hi, everyone. It's your girl, Alexis. I am back with the power of freedom and my journey through grief. Today, I have a special guest, Dr. Kara Paris, whom is a counselor and a life coach. Welcome, Dr. Paris. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. How are you doing today?
I'm great. So, today, we're going to be talking about the different stages of grief. Lately, I know people have been dealing with a lot of loss, myself included. Have lost loved ones, have lost people that I've known for years. And sometimes we don't know how to deal with the different stages that we're going through, or we don't know what stages we're in. So today I just want to talk with you and ask a few questions concerning the different stages of grief.
Okay. All right, that's not a problem. That's why I'm here. I think it's important to talk about the grieving process on a whole, even before you get into those stages, because a lot of times people don't know what they're getting into and they're not able to identify even that that's what's happening. And so, just to give some insight about grief and the grieving process into the stages, the different types of grief, all of those things are so important because then I think people will begin to become more gracious toward themselves and allow healing to begin to take place. But sometimes we don't know, we don't understand. Nothing usually makes sense when we're grieving, depending on where we are in it. And so, understanding key elements concerning grief and loss, bereavement, are really, really important so that as you go through stages, you go through different feelings, emotions, then you're able to identify and be gracious to yourself to take the time to go through them. And nothing happens chronologically or with congruency. It's always kind of all over the place, but it's still normal processes.
Absolutely. So with that different stages and the what causes grief, what would you say a stage of grief would be? What are the different stages that we should look for in the process of grieving?
All right. Well, as far as grieving is concerned, there are there are said to be initially we had about five stages. It's since gone up from there, but nonetheless, the basic foundational stages that we have are about five of them, as I mentioned before, and it is denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance, anger. Those are stages, or those are emotions, places that people will find themselves as they are experiencing this grief, this loss that happens to be taking place in their life, and it's all over the place. It doesn't grow, from denial to anger, from anger to bargaining, but it might go from anger all the way to bargaining to denial to acceptance to depression and just all over like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I can relate because I know with currently losing a loved one that I recently just lost, it jumped from denial to thinking that I accepted it, and it wasn't that, jumping right back into denial and not really knowing the different stages of grief. My mind was all over the place. So one minute I'm in denial, the next minute I'm thinking I accepted the fact that they were gone, but really I'm still in denial. How often is that occurrence for the people in
Well,
today's world?
just people in general, really. It's pretty normal, really. Grief in and of itself, it's just a natural emotional response. It comes from a loss, a significant loss, right? Especially the death of a loved one. So in the process of experiencing, the way that you might go through it is different from how I'll go through it. We all go through it differently based on our cultures, based on who we are as individuals, and even based on the situations. So we experience differently, we respond differently. But there are a lot of times, like somebody can cry, another person can laugh, like totally start cracking up. It's not a laughing moment, but that's just how they happen to be responding. Another person can completely engraft themselves in work, and staying busy because they don't want to deal. Some people physically will throw up, others are numb. And, it is a natural healing process, but there's a right way and then there's a not so right way in which to do it. So we just have to be remembering that, grief is a natural process. It doesn't always require treatment, but sometimes it does. There are different types of grief. We have acute grief, we have complicated grief, we have integrated grief. And that's something that we could talk about a little later or whatever. But I just wanted to give some quick insight as far as what those things are. So, you asked the question, how often does that happen, the jumping around? It's really dependent on the person. It depends on how they are processing, or if they are processing their grief. Are they talking to someone or aren't they talking to someone? Like, what's going on with them? Because when you're all over the place, when you're not able to make sense of anything, when you're angry and you're overwhelmed, or your emotion, when I say all over the place, I'm talking about your emotions. When your emotions are like that, sometimes it's hard to see. Sometimes it's hard to just have one thought that makes sense when you're trying to figure out what in the world just happened. you know I just talked to them yesterday, like, how did this happen? Why did it happen? All of these are the questions that will come. And depending on what my temperament is, depending on how close I may not have been to the person, depending on how they passed, all of these are variables that will add to how I grieve. So it's different for everyone.
That's good. That's true. So in being in, for example, if a person is in the stage of denial, is it possible for them to be in bargaining? And what is bargaining? What does that look like?
It is possible for for you to be in different stages. Yes, it's almost like a bounce back. Like one minute I'm here, the next minute I'm here, or I could feel like I'm doing them in tandem, where I feel like I just can't believe that this is happening, and at the same time I feel like, maybe I could do something to change this, right? That's kind of what it is. So let's talk a little bit about what the stages are again. We mentioned that there are five main ones, and they are denial, they are anger, they're bargaining, they are depression, and their acceptance. Right? Those five in particular. When we think of denial, in our minds, we're like, we refuse to accept the fact that there's been a loss. Like we cannot fathom it. Our minds just cannot wrap around the idea. And so what we'll do is that we'll either minimize or we'll completely deny. We'll minimize the situation, like we get it, but we don't really get it. So we'll minimize it, like play it off, like, yeah, nah, that ain't so. It's a form of denial. Another one is just flat out, no, she's not dead, or no, he's not dead. I refuse to accept, right? And so when we're dealing with things like that, you'll find that people will automatically get angry when maybe it's right in front of them. They'll automatically get angry because it cannot be. Even though I am
That-
seeing this person, even though we're all gathered here in the family room and we're all crying because we know what just happened, but psychologically the connect hasn't been made because it just can't be. It just can't be. And so that's what happens in denial. You're thinking this cannot be happening. Whereas with anger, it's not this can't be happening, it's more why is this happening? So you are mad. Why? Why did they have to? Why aren't they here right now? Why did that person? Why them and not somebody else? Why? Right? Why is this happening to me? Why is it happening to me? Okay, so when an individual realizes that a loss has occurred, they become angry at themselves at others or at others.
Mhm.
They may argue that the situation is unfair and they may try to place some blame. But anger, it's very real and it is a part of grieving. And so if you find that you have experienced anger, as a matter of fact, why don't you take the time to answer that? Have you found that you have experienced anger in your process? And do you think you got angry right away? Or was it something that actually continued? Or you found that it was on one minute you're angry and the next minute you weren't?
Well, with myself, I can say I've dealt with anger because in losing a cousin that I lost to gun violence, it was more of why him? Why he has three young children that he left behind? Why did he have to lose his life at such a young age? He still had so much to go on in his life that he could have lived for. He could have lived a little longer just to show who he really, was. And I felt myself just mad and angry at the world and didn't really know that that's what it was, but I knew that I was feeling some type of way because I had just lost this cousin that I was very close with. We were only just 2 months apart. So it was more of my thought, my in my mind, I'm like, why him? Why? Like why is he gone? Like why? I just saw him just a week before his death, and you're telling me now that he's not here anymore? Like, why did you take my cousin away from me? Why?
Yeah. And so let's just stay right there for a moment because you said two things. The first thing you said was that you were mad at the world. And just now you said, but why did you take my cousin away from me? So who is the you? And when you say you're mad at the world, what world are you talking about?
Well, because it was multiple, he hung with multiple people, but we know that it was one killer. So now it's more toward that one individual more than toward the people that he hung around. When it first happened, my anger was more toward his homeboys and those that he hung around because I felt like they knew who had taken his life.
Okay.
But now that I'm aware of it was just one individual, my anger was more now toward that one individual.
Okay. And as far as the world, does it still all is that all a composite of that process? In other words, when you said the world, were you talking about that group of people or were you talking about something else? And when you say the you, was it just toward the one person or was there something else that you were also contemplating when you said you?
When I what I meant by the world was really the group of people that he hung around and that he was close to. And when I referred to you, it was more of the individual that actually pulled the trigger to take his life.
Okay. And did by any chance did you ever get upset with yourself? Did you feel like you had anger towards you or no?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, again, that's just an example that these are the things that we do experience. We do go through this stuff. And when we feel that way, a lot of times if we don't have someone to talk to or we don't have the appropriate coping skills, then we can find that we will spiral down into a place where we'll find ourselves from being angry and somehow we're depressed, right? We end up being in a depressive mood because now I'm just, I'm just so. What's the point? You know, um, if he was trying to do well and he was trying to be there for his children and he was, what's the point of going on? What's the point? There's so many different ways. Like in depression, during that stage, what will happen is that an individual they come to realize that the loss has occurred or it will occur. Okay, and then they for themselves begin to isolate themselves. They tend to spend more time doing a lot of crying, A lot of the what's the point, uh, it is a precursor to acceptance because the individual now has come to recognize that there is a loss, but at the same time, it's how long will they stay in that stage? What do they need to do to make sure they don't stay there too long? And how do they get out of that? So, understanding the stages, understanding the emotions that come, these are all good points to share and for each to understand, especially now with all that's going on, with COVID and just hearing the amount of deaths, or not just the death of a loved one, but you can also experience grief by, you know, losing a job that sustains you and your family and things of that nature. It is a significant loss that will establish some level of grief in your life. And these are some of those stages that you will pass through, not necessarily one after the other, but at some point in time, you'll find that you may process through all of them.
So, Dr. Paris, what advice would you give to an individual or someone out there that may be dealing with one of these stages that they may not know that they're in the middle of, but they are grieving? What advice would you give that individual on how to help them cope with the process of grief?
Okay, well, for sure, I'm an advocate, so I would recommend that you get with someone, that you talk with someone, that you get a therapist, a counselor. Don't let that be what holds you back. It's important for you to talk. Like, talking is really, really helpful when you are grieving. Not all the time do we want to speak because we don't necessarily want to confront, we don't want to deal with, we don't want to go through that pain that we might be feeling. But it is important because in talking, it will help to diminish those things. It will help to get you from one phase, one stage to another. It'll help to get you through the process. It will help to shift you from being in full distress or sadness. Maybe you don't have a good appetite. Maybe you're having trouble sleeping. Maybe you can't concentrate. Being able to talk really helps you. It really helps you. So when I mentioned before, that treatment, not everyone requires treatment, but some do, then this is one of the best treatments that is out there. Psychotherapy, talking to someone, getting a counselor, talking to your pastor, um, someone who is of wise counsel, someone who understands the process of grief. You want to be able to share with someone to assist you, because you never want to go through that alone. A lot of times we might think that people don't understand, but it's also in the talking that you give understanding, and they might not be fully able to empathize, but they can sympathize and not like feel bad for you, but they have lost something or someone in some way. Maybe there's empathy there, but because they care for you, there might be some sympathy, not because you are a sad person, but just because you are sad and they are sad with you. So, as far as a recommendation, that will be the ultimate recommendation. As with when you are experiencing any kind of feeling that makes you want to isolate and stay away from, you don't want to do that. You want to try to be around people. You want to make sure that the people that you love, you want to try to be around them. You want to be around laughter. You want to try to do those things that helps to um, cause your affect to become more on a positive note, to uplift your spirit. That's what you want, because you could do sad by yourself because of what's going on, because of the emotional turmoil that you might be experiencing inside. So connecting yourself or being around, surrounding yourself with people that will breathe some life into you right now, that's what you will need. So your support system is also something else that would be of great benefit for you.
Thank you, Dr. Paris.
You're welcome.
So before we wrap it up, I want to ask, next month I want to talk more about the different stages of grief.
Okay.
Would you mind joining me on next month to finish up talking about the stages of grief?
Not a problem at all.
Okay, awesome. So just to encourage someone out there, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to cry. It's even okay to be upset, but we can't stay there. We just can't stay there. So I will see you all on next month. Be encouraged and know that God is in control and He makes no mistakes. We'll see you all next month. Have a blessed day.
Bye-bye. You take care.
Bye.